Next time you're sitting in a hospital waiting room, or maybe walking down the massive aisle of one of those big box warehouse stores, I want you to look up at the ceiling.
Yeah, you're usually going to see a tiny, unassuming piece of metal up there.
Right. Maybe it has like a little glass bulb in the center of it, and it looks like the simplest, most mundane piece of plumbing imaginable.
It really does.
But behind that tiny piece of metal is this invisible, massive, and just incredibly rigorous legal and technical machine,
Oh, absolutely. It's a machine of bureaucracy.
right? Of fiercely heated debates and competing corporate interests and strict parliamentary procedure. So today we are taking a deep dive into the ecosystem of the National Fire Protection Association.
Specifically, we're going to focus on the 2014 edition of NFPA 25.
Exactly. And for those who don't know, that is the standard for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems.
Quite a mouthful.
It really is. But we are cracking open the vault today to see exactly how these life-saving rules are forged, how they are challenged, and who the thousands of professionals are that they dedicate their lives to arguing over microscopic details that keep buildings from burning to the ground.
And the crucial word in that massive title is actually the easiest one to overlook, which is maintenance.
Maintenance. Yeah.
Because we naturally focus on the dramatic phases of a building's life.
Yeah.
Like installing a state-of-the-art fire protection system in a brand new billion-dollar skyscraper.
Oh, sure. That's a massive event.
Right. It has a dedicated budget, a strict construction timeline, city inspections, and, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. It is a massive capital expenditure.
But the moment that building opens, the installation team just packs up and leaves.
Exactly. The system stays behind.
Right.
And maintaining a dormant water-based system is an entirely different, highly complex beast.
Which requires relentless vigilance.
Over years, or even decades.
I want to stop on that concept for a second, of a dormant system. Because, if I install a brand new HVAC system, I turn it on and it runs every single day.
Yeah, you feel it immediately.
Right. If a belt snaps or a compressor fails, the building gets too hot, people instantly complain to the facility manager, and somebody comes to fix it. The failure makes itself known.
But a sprinkler system is effectively a massive network of pressurized pipes that you are paying to sit there and do absolutely nothing.
Do nothing for 10 years. And then on a random Tuesday at 2 in the morning, it has to spring into action and work flawlessly in a matter of seconds.
And that invisible degradation that is the entire physical premise behind NFPA 25. Because you cannot just build a system, cross your fingers, and hope it remains operational.
Right.
Because water is a universal solvent.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
When you have pressurized water sitting static inside steel pipes for years, physics and chemistry just take over.
They go to work.
Yeah, you have galvanic corrosion slowly eating away at the interior of the metal.
Just dissolving it from the inside.
Exactly. You have microbiologically influenced corrosion.
Wait, what is that? Like bacteria?
Literally bacteria in the water that excrete acids and pit the steel from the inside out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you have rubber gaskets in the control valves experiencing dry rot. You have massive diesel fire pumps sitting in basements. And if those engines aren't cranked and run regularly, the lubricants settle, the bearings seize up, the impellers calcify.
So the system is constantly trying to destroy itself just by existing?
That is exactly what's happening.
Which means you need a really rigid set of rules to constantly fight back against that decay.
Right.
Because writing the code to build a sprinkler system seems, mathematically straightforward, right? Like you need X amount of water pressure for Y amount of square footage.
Yeah, the hydraulics are pretty standard.
But NFPA 25, though, is like the strict diet and exercise routine to keep that system alive over time.
That's a great way to look at it.
And to make sure that routine is actually safe and effective, the rules dictating it have to survive this grueling multi-year gauntlet.
And it is a gauntlet. It's designed to force a massive, heavily fragmented industry into a single consensus.
Which is not easy.
Not at all. The rules governing how the NFPA makes the rules are laid out in this document called the NFPA Regulations governing the development of NFPA standards.
Also a very catchy title.
Right. But the process begins with what is officially called the Technical Committee Report.
Okay.
This is the preparation phase for a new or revised standard. And it kicks off with the input stage, which eventually results in the first draft report.
So the input state, I mean, it sounds like a generic suggestion box, but looking at the documentation, this is a massive intake of highly technical data
It really is.
because the first draft report consists of the first draft itself, but also public input, committee input, correlating input, and ballot statements. It's basically an open call to the entire global fire safety community.
Think of the input stage as this giant funnel, right? Catching the collective experience of the entire industry.
Okay, yeah.
You have mechanical engineers, local fire inspectors, insurance underwriters, and building owners all submitting their real-world data.
So anyone can submit something.
Basically, yeah. Suppose a facility manager in Chicago realizes that a specific type of check valve in a fire pump system is consistently rusting shut after 6 months.
Okay.
But the current NFPA 25 standard only requires that valve to be inspected annually.
Oh, I see the problem. So it's failing before it's even required to be checked.
Exactly. So that manager submits public input saying, hey, here's my maintenance data, here are photographs of the failed valves. I propose we change the rule to require a quarterly inspection.
Wow. So they bring actual receipts to the committee.
Right. The committee then reviews this mountain of input, they debate it, and they publish the first draft.
Okay.
But buried in the procedural rules for this stage is an incredibly sharp mechanism.
I noticed this.
Yeah, it states, and I quote, any objection to an action in the first draft report must be raised through the filing of an appropriate comment. Comment for consideration in the second draft report, or the objection will be considered resolved.
Wait, I need to push back on that phrase, considered resolved.
It's quite a phrase.
It is. That is such a polite, bureaucratic way of saying you missed your chance and your voice is now legally erased.
That's exactly what it means.
Because if I am a small business owner or an independent contractor and I simply didn't see the first draft publication in time to file my paperwork, my valid safety or economic concern is completely ignored.
Basically, yes.
How does an organization dedicated to life safety justify excluding potentially vital input just because somebody missed a calendar deadline? I mean, it sounds exclusionary, not democratic.
Well, it sounds ruthless until you look at the historical alternative.
Okay, what's the alternative?
Without that procedural guillotine, safety standards get filibustered.
Filibustered. Like in politics.
It's exactly like in politics. Imagine a scenario where a heavily funded corporate interest, say a massive warehousing conglomerate, realizes that a new proposed testing frequency is going to cost them millions of dollars in downtime.
Because they have to shut down the warehouse to run the test.
Right. Now, if the process remains perpetually open, that corporation could simply wait until the very end of the review cycle and suddenly dump 1,000 pages of quote-unquote new objections.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, forcing the committee to halt the standard, review all the new data, and delay the safety implementation for another 3 years.
Just to buy time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by doing this repeatedly, you can stall a regulation indefinitely.
So they use the open process against itself.
Yes. The NFPA prevents these stalling tactics by implementing a strict, speak now or forever hold your peace timeline.
I see.
The process dictates that protecting human life requires a schedule. Bring your data when the window is open, or your objection is legally erased to protect the momentum of the standard.
So it forces accountability. You can't just casually complain about a rule. You have to actively participate in the governance of your own industry.
You really do.
And that pushes us further down the funnel. So we move from the massive open intake of the first draft into step 2, which is the second draft report.
Right.
This is officially the comment stage. The committee has published their initial revisions, and now the industry gets to react to those specific changes.
And the funnel narrows significantly here. The second draft report includes public comments, the corresponding committee actions and statements, correlating notes, and more ballot statements.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, let's stick with our hypothetical check valve rule.
From the guy in Chicago.
Exactly. The committee agreed with the facility manager from Chicago and updated the first draft to require quarterly inspections.
Nice win for Chicago.
Right. But now, in the comment stage, a warehouse owner reads that first draft and realizes that inspecting that valve quarterly requires completely draining a massive section of their overhead piping 4 times a year.
Oh, and that causes massive operational shutdowns.
Exactly. So they file a public comment arguing that the economic burden outweighs the statistical safety benefit, and they propose a biannual inspection instead.
Okay, so our compromise.
Right. The committee reviews the comment, makes their final tweaks, and then publishes the second draft,
And then we hit that procedural wall again.
the guillotine.
Right. Because the rules state that any outstanding objection following the second draft report must be raised through an appropriate amending motion at the association technical meeting. Or, once again, the objection will be considered resolved.
Drops right on their heads.
But this assumes the system is flawless, right? What happens if a critical, life-threatening flaw is noticed too late?
Well,
Like, what if an engineer realizes that draining the system quarterly actually accelerates the oxygen-driven corrosion we talked about earlier, but nobody caught it until after the second draft phase?
that's a really good question. The strictness of the timeline places a heavy burden of vigilance on the community. The system operates on the premise of collective responsibility. Because there are so many competing interests involved,
Like who?
well, insurance companies looking to minimize risk payouts, building owners looking to minimize maintenance costs, manufacturers protecting their products, and fire departments looking to maximize rescue safety.
So everyone is sort of watching each other.
Exactly. The NFPA trusts that this intense friction will force any critical flaw to the surface early in the process. Someone's bottom line or safety protocol will be threatened enough to catch the error.
It relies on the competing self-interests of the industry acting as this sort of crowdsourced safety net.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So let's say our warehouse owner filed their comment in step 2, arguing against the quarterly inspection, but the committee rejected their argument. The rule is still in the standard, and the owner is still unhappy.
They're furious, probably.
Right. So this is where the bureaucracy shifts from paperwork to a live physical battleground. The debate goes to the floor. Step 3A, action at the association technical meeting.
And this is where the process becomes a literal parliament.
A parliament of fire safety.
Yeah. But you cannot just show up at the annual NFPA convention in June, walk up to a microphone, and start complaining about the check valve rule.
They won't let you speak.
No. To argue a point on the floor, you must have previously submitted a notice of intent to make a motion.
An IT ma'am.
A NIT ma'am. Yes,
It sounds like a highly bureaucratic magical spell, like you have to cast an NT ma'am to speak.
it really does.
Mhm.
But without it, you are procedurally invisible. The NIT ma'am is submitted and reviewed well before the meeting. And if it's certified, it becomes a certified amending motion.
Okay.
Only then is it placed on the official agenda for the June meeting.
I used to think a rule like that was just petty gatekeeping, but looking at the scale of this operation, it makes total sense.
It's completely necessary.
Yeah, because if you have 5,000 highly specialized, highly opinionated engineers, fire chiefs, and corporate lawyers in a massive convention hall, and literally anyone could just walk up to a microphone to introduce a new idea.
You would have sheer chaos.
You would. You would spend 3 weeks debating the placement of a single comma.
Well, absolutely.
So the NIT ma'am forces you to publish your exact, precise argument months in advance. It serves as a parliamentary docket, basically giving everyone else in the room time to research their counterarguments.
Exactly. Picture the tension in that convention hall.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
This isn't a debate about abstract philosophy. This is a debate about physical reality, human life, and millions of dollars in operational costs.
High stakes.
Very. So the warehouse owner, having secured their certified amending motion, steps up to the microphone. They present their engineering data showing the corrosion caused by frequent draining, and their economic data showing the cost of downtime.
Right.
And then they formally move to amend the standard back to a biannual inspection.
Okay.
Then the opposing side, perhaps the fire chiefs or the insurance underwriters, they step to the microphone to defend the committee's stricter rule.
And
then room votes.
wow. The NFPA membership considers and acts on these motions live.
Right there on the floor.
And the rules state that if an amending motion succeeds, it can even trigger follow-up amending motions.
Yeah, that's a cascade effect.
Because if changing that valve inspection to biannual suddenly makes a different rule about, say, water pump pressure nonsensical, a follow-up motion is triggered to fix the resulting contradiction.
Right, you have to keep the standard cohesive.
It is a live, dynamic, incredibly intense democratic process happening right there on the floor.
It really is a profound example of an entire industry engaging in self-governance.
Mm.
But, the system also rewards consensus.
How so?
Well, under Step 3B, if the second draft comes out and nobody submits an NAT ma'am,
Like everyone's just happy with it.
yeah, if the entire industry reviews the draft and collectively agrees that it's acceptable, the standard skips the June meeting entirely.
Oh, wow.
It's forwarded directly to the Standards Council for action on issuance. In procedural terms, all objections are deemed resolved.
So it's a fast track. You only go to the convention floor if you are looking for a fight.
Exactly.
But even if you do fight and you lose the vote on the floor of the convention, the process isn't fully over because this bureaucracy has its own Supreme Court. Step 4, the final word.
And Step 4A outlines the council appeals process.
Okay, how did that work?
Anyone can appeal to the Standards Council concerning procedural or substantive matters. So if our warehouse owner loses the floor vote, but they believe the committee actively ignored vital, peer-reviewed safety data regarding corrosion.
Or they think someone cheated during the vote.
Right. If they believe the voting process at the June meeting was procedurally flawed in some way, they can file an appeal.
But they are still trapped in the machinery of deadlines, right?
Always.
The appeals must be in written form, filed with the Secretary of the Standards Council, and they are bound by extremely strict time constraints. Miss the deadline, and the objection is deemed resolved.
It never ends. But assuming the appeals are settled or dismissed, we reach Step 4B, which is document issuance.
The final stamp of approval.
Exactly. The Standards Council is the ultimate authority that officially issues all NFPA documents. They act on the issuance of a document presented at the technical meeting within 75 days from the date of the meeting's recommendation.
75 days. That is an incredibly tight turnaround for an international standard of this magnitude.
The aggressive timeline is intentional, though.
Why?
The Council wants these updated safety standards codified and placed into the hands of local inspectors and facility managers as rapidly as possible.
That makes sense. Once a safety issue is identified, you don't want to sit on the solution.
Right. However, there is one final layer to this entire mechanism. A nuclear option, if you will.
I love a nuclear option. What is it?
Section IX of the regulations details petitions to the Board of Directors.
Wait, if the Standards Council handles the day-to-day administration and the final issuance of the documents, why does the Board of Directors need to get involved?
Well, the rules explicitly state that the board intervenes only where extraordinary circumstances exist.
Extraordinary circumstance.
Yeah. The board has the power to take any action necessary to fulfill their obligation to preserve the integrity of the codes and standards development process and to protect the interests of the association.
You know, dissecting that phrase, extraordinary circumstances, is really revealing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the ultimate admission by the NFPA that no system of rules, no matter how flawlessly designed, is infallible.
Right.
It acknowledges that even the most rigorous draft stages, the most carefully certified NIT-MAMs and the most heavily scrutinized floor votes can sometimes be manipulated. Or, more likely, a completely unprecedented safety crisis could emerge that the standard parliamentary procedure simply cannot process fast enough. The board holds the emergency override switch to protect public safety.
And that emergency override is rarely used, but its mere existence validates the entire structure.
It's a safety net for the safety net.
Exactly. It ensures that bureaucracy never completely supersedes human judgment in life or death scenarios.
I do have to ask about the cumulative effect of all this friction, though.
Okay, shoot.
I mean, think about it. First draft, public input, second draft, public comments, NIT-MAMs, floor votes, council appeals, board petitions. Does this massive multi-tiered bureaucracy actively harm public safety by slowing down innovation?
How do you mean?
Let's say a brilliant engineer invents a massively superior, non-destructive way to test the flow of a fire pump. How long does it take for that innovation to survive the gauntlet and actually become a recognized, compliant method in NFPA 25?
You are identifying the eternal tension at the heart of all building codes.
Right, because technology moves so fast.
It does. And you are constantly balancing the desire for rapid technological innovation against the absolute non-negotiable requirement for proven long-term reliability.
So it takes a while.
Yes, the process takes years. A standard revision cycle is not quick.
Right.
If you invent a new testing method, you must introduce it during the input stage of the next available cycle.
Which could be years away.
Right. You must provide extensive empirical data. You must survive the pushback of competitors. It cannot be rushed, because if you rush a flawed testing method into NFPA 25, you might have 50,000 hospitals and high-rises believing their fire pumps are perfectly viable, when, in reality, the new test failed to detect a critical flaw.
Wow, it's like a massive flywheel in a machine.
A flywheel.
Because it takes a tremendous amount of energy and time to get it spinning in a new direction. But that exact same weight and friction makes it incredibly stable and resistant to suddenly flying off its axis.
That's a perfect analogy.
The bureaucracy itself is a safety mechanism.
Hmm.
It forces new ideas to prove their structural integrity before they are allowed to protect human life.
That is an excellent way to frame it. The friction filters out unproven trends and knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
Which brings up a vital question, actually. Who is supplying the energy to turn this flywheel?
Right. Who are these people?
Who are the people dedicating hundreds of hours of their professional lives to reading draft reports, filing comments, and debating the maintenance schedule of a sprinkler valve?
Well, we can get a really clear picture of this ecosystem just by looking at the demographic data the NFTA collects on their membership application form.
It's pretty revealing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because when you join, you have to categorize yourself, and the resulting cross-section is fascinating. You have the obvious job titles, right? Architect, engineer, consultant,
The
contractor.
people designing, building, and fixing the physical pipe.
Exactly. And you have the enforcement side.
Yeah.
Inspector, building official, fire chief, fire marshal. But then you look at the type of organization checkboxes, and the true diversity of the ecosystem really reveals itself.
You see categories like commercial firm, which they define as office, retail, lodging, and restaurants.
Okay.
You have industrial firm, which covers factories and warehouses. You have institutional, encompassing healthcare, education, detention centers, and museums.
Museums, wow.
And you have insurance.
Just putting those titles together in a single room creates immediate, massive conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
I love the idea that a museum curator trying to protect a gallery of priceless Renaissance oil paintings is operating in the exact same rulemaking ecosystem as the administrator of a maximum security prison and the manager of a massive chemical manufacturing plant.
Yeah. They're all at the same table.
Right. Fire safety is not just the domain of firefighters, it is deeply contextual.
Let's expand on that context, actually, because those varying environments are exactly why the technical committee report process is so fiercely debated.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's role-play a committee meeting discussing the maintenance of a highly sensitive pre-action sprinkler valve.
And a pre-action system, just to clarify, is designed to keep water out of the pipes until the absolute last second, usually to prevent accidental water damage.
Exactly. So sitting on one side of the table, you have the institutional representative, the museum curator.
Yeah.
Their nightmare isn't necessarily a fire. Their nightmare is a maintenance error that accidentally trips the valve, floods the gallery, and destroys $50 million worth of art.
Ouch. Yeah, that's terrifying.
So they are going to advocate for incredibly rigorous, highly specialized, constant inspections of that control valve to ensure it never, ever opens by mistake.
Makes total sense.
Sitting across from them is the industrial representative, the warehouse manager, running a 24-hour fulfillment center.
Okay, totally different world.
Entirely. Their entire metric of success is throughput. If the rule requires a maintenance team to shut down a section of the warehouse every single month to run a complex diagnostic on a valve, that warehouse loses hundreds of thousands of dollars in operational downtime.
So they hate the curator's idea.
They are going to fight the curator tooth and nail, arguing that an annual inspection is statistically sufficient and that the monthly requirement is an undue economic burden.
And then sitting next to them is the insurance risk manager.
Right.
They don't care about the museum's art, and they don't care about the warehouse's downtime.
Not at all.
Their only concern is actuarial math. They are the ones paying the massive liability claim if the building burns down, so they want the maintenance rules to be as strict, redundant, and fail-proof as physically possible, regardless of how much it annoys the warehouse manager.
Finally, at the head of the table, you have the fire chief.
Ah, the fire chief.
And the fire chief's perspective cuts through all the economics and the liability. When their team arrives at a fully involved structure fire, and they hook their hoses into the building's standpipe system, they need to know that the system will instantly deliver the required water pressure.
Life or death.
Exactly. If a valve was left shut because a maintenance check was skipped to save money, firefighters die.
Wow. So the resulting standard NFPA 25 is the physical printed compromise between these intense, wildly divergent forces.
That's exactly what it is.
It is a negotiated settlement between economic viability, liability mitigation, and human life. Because if you just locked those four people in a room and told them to figure it out, they would scream at each other until the end of time.
They would get nowhere.
Right, so the rigid bureaucracy, the first draft, the NITMAMs, the appeals, is the only framework capable of forcing these opposing worldviews to reach a workable consensus.
Exactly. The process absorbs the conflict and weaponizes it, to forge a stronger rule.
Weaponizes it. I like that.
But, how does an individual professional actually gain access to this arena?
Yeah, how do you get a seat at that table?
Well, the economics and the inside track of NFPA membership are surprisingly accessible, but the application form contains some very specific, highly calculated fine print.
Okay, let's look at the barrier to entry because for an organization wielding this much global influence, the financial cost is surprisingly low.
It really is.
A 1-year membership is $165. 2 years is $300, and a 3-year commitment is $430. They even back the first year with a 100% money-back guarantee.
Which tells me they are desperate for broad, active participation. They want fresh data from the field.
Yeah, and the benefits package accompanying that fee reveals how the NFPA views its relationship with the industry.
What do you get?
Members receive the NFPA Journal, which is a bi-monthly publication covering industry trends. They get the monthly NFPA Update e-newsletter, access to the standards directory, a 10% discount on training materials, and an invitation to the annual conference and expo.
Not bad for $165.
Not bad at all. They also get free access to any of the 16 industry-specific sections, allowing them to network directly with peers in their exact subfield, whether that is healthcare facility management or industrial loss control.
But there is one perk that completely eclipses the newsletters and the discounts.
Oh, yeah.
It's listed right here on the application in bold letters, FREE, technical support.
That's a huge deal.
It really is. The application promises one-on-one technical support by phone or email directly from the NFPA's team of fire protection specialists.
So if you are a facility manager listening to this right now, staring at a complex fire pump arrangement in your basement and scratching your head at the codebook.
That $165 fee suddenly becomes the cheapest, most vital insurance policy you can buy.
Seriously. Put yourself in the exact shoes of that facility manager. You are standing in a mechanical room at midnight. You have a 1,500-gallon-per-minute diesel-driven fire pump.
A beast of a machine.
Yeah. And you are trying to interpret a highly nuanced paragraph in NFPA 25 regarding the weekly no-flow churn test.
Which is very technical.
Very. The code language is dense, and your specific pump controller looks slightly different than the diagram. If you guess wrong, you might damage a $50,000 piece of equipment, or worse.
You might leave the pump in a state where it won't activate during a fire.
Exactly. But instead of guessing or scouring internet forums for dubious advice from strangers, you can pick up the phone and directly call the organization that physically wrote the rule.
You are talking to the specialists who sit in on those committee meetings.
And that single benefit shifts the NFPA from being a distant ivory tower bureaucracy in Massachusetts to an active, on-the-ground partner in your daily maintenance routine. It closes the loop between the rule makers and the rule followers.
It is an incredible resource. However, access to the democratic power of the NFPA is carefully guarded.
Ah, the fine print.
Right. If you look closely at the fine print on the application form, under the voting rights section, there's a critical safeguard.
What does it say?
It clearly states, voting rights go into effect 180 days from the start of individual membership.
A 6-month waiting period before you are allowed to cast a vote on the convention floor.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, when I first read that, I immediately thought of the political tactics we see in local government, like gerrymandering or packing a town hall meeting.
That's exactly why it's there.
Let's return to our hypothetical warehouse owner who is furious about the quarterly valve inspection rule.
Okay, the guy who wants biannual inspections.
Right. The stricter rule has survived the drafts, and it is scheduled to be debated as a certified amending motion at the June convention. The warehouse owner knows that the final decision comes down to a simple floor vote by the members present in the room.
So what is to stop that massive corporate entity from leveraging their financial power to rig the outcome?
Exactly. Without that rule, a billion-dollar logistics company could easily spend, $16,000 in May to buy 100 individual NFPA memberships for their mid-level managers.
Which is pocket change for them.
Pure pocket change. They could bus them all to the convention center in June, instruct them to flood the floor, and vote down the safety standard purely to protect the company's profit margins.
They could literally buy a flash mob to alter life-saving safety codes.
But the 180-day rule mathematically eliminates that vulnerability. By forcing a 6-month delay before voting privileges activate, the NFPA ensures that any attempt to manipulate the vote requires a long-term, highly coordinated effort that would be easily spotted by the rest of the community.
It acts like a thermal mass in a building.
A thermal mass.
Yeah, you can't just blast the air conditioning and instantly drop the temperature of a massive concrete structure, the mass resists the sudden change.
Oh, I see.
By forcing a 6-month delay, the NFPA gives the voting pool a massive bureaucratic thermal mass. It fiercely resists sudden artificial spikes in corporate voting temperature.
That's a brilliant way to describe it.
If you want a voice in the democratic process of the association technical meeting, you cannot just be a corporate proxy bussed in for a single issue. You have to be an invested, long-term member of the ecosystem.
It is a tiny line of text on an application form, but it literally holds the integrity of the entire international safety structure together.
It demonstrates a profound institutional self-awareness. The NFPA understands that their consensus model is incredibly powerful, but that power makes it a target for manipulation.
Naturally.
The stakes preventing catastrophic loss of life and property are simply too high to allow the rulemaking process to be treated like a hostile corporate takeover.
When we pull back and look at the totality of what we have explored today, the perspective shift is staggering. A document like NFPA 25 isn't just a boring checklist for building supers, and it isn't an arbitrary set of demands handed down by a faceless government entity.
No, it is a living, breathing mechanism.
It is forged on the anvil of the technical committee report. It survives an intense crucible of first drafts, public inputs, and second drafts.
It navigates a strict, unyielding gauntlet of deadlines where miffed objections vanish forever to protect the momentum of safety.
And it is debated openly and fiercely on a convention floor by a remarkably diverse coalition of professionals.
From museum curators protecting history to fire chiefs protecting lives.
Who are forced by parliamentary procedure to find a workable consensus.
And it is heavily armored by layers of appeals, a board of directors acting as an emergency Supreme Court, and clever bureaucratic safeguards like the 180-day voting delay.
It is, quite frankly, a masterpiece of specialized human cooperation.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to carry with you.
I think we need one.
We began this dive by asking you to look up at that simple metal sprinkler head in the ceiling of a hospital or a warehouse. Next time you walk into any massive public space, realize that your physical safety in that building isn't just guaranteed by the water pressure resting in those pipes or the thickness of the steel.
It's guaranteed by an invisible, ongoing argument.
Exactly. You are being protected right now by the meticulous debates, the fiercely contested amending motions, and the dedicated consensus of thousands of strangers.
Strangers who spent years of their professional lives deciding exactly how often that specific valve needs to be tested to ensure it will work the one time it truly matters.
It fundamentally changes how you view the built environment.
It really does. It makes you wonder, as you walk through your daily life, how many other invisible systems of massive, meticulous bureaucracy are quietly working in the background, arguing over the details, just to keep you alive today.